Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Today's question is, can I analyze the case of Jesse Hernandez? Just a reminder, I'm not diagnosing anybody in this video, only speculating about what could be happening in a situation like this. If you enjoyed this video, please like it, subscribe to my channel, and consider supporting me on Patreon. I will put the link to Patreon in the description for this video. First, I'll look at the timeline of the incident, then offer my analysis. This case takes place in Fort Walton Beach, Florida, which is about an hour east of Pensacola, on November 12, 2023, at about 8:42 a.m. The police were notified about a vehicle causing a disturbance on McLaren Circle in Fort Walton Beach. A black male driver in his late 20s had been honking the horn and disrupting the peace since 3 a.m. At 8:55 a.m., a woman named Celestiana Lopez called the police and reported that her boyfriend, Marquis Jackson, had possession of her vehicle and was refusing to return it. Because Celestiana was at a friend's house on McLaren Circle, the two calls were linked together. Officers from the Okaloosa County Sheriff's Office started arriving at the scene at 8:57 a.m. 4 officers arrived in total: Jesse Hernandez, Beth Roberts, Javier Reyna, and Deha Riley. Jesse Hernandez had only been a police officer since January 2022, but Beth Roberts had been an officer for over 15 years and was a sergeant. Beth spoke to Celestiana, who said that her boyfriend Marquis not only refused to return her vehicle, but he had sent threatening text messages to her. One message contained what appeared to be a firearm suppressor pointed at the vehicle's dashboard. It is reasonable to believe the suppressor was connected to a firearm. She wanted to press charges for theft and mentioned that Marquis could be violent. At around 9:09 a.m., Marquis Jackson arrived at the scene on foot. 2 officers, Jesse and Javier, made contact with him and patted him down. They were about 50 feet away from where Beth was talking to Celestiana. Marquis was arrested at 9:12 a.m. The officers handcuffed him and walked him to the patrol vehicle operated by Jesse Hernandez. It was a Dodge Durango. Javier completed a more thorough search of Marquis while Jesse was standing there. As Beth worked with Celestiana on an affidavit of complaint for the alleged vehicle theft, she asked her if Marquis had any aftermarket items on his firearm. Celestiana confirmed that he had a suppressor, but did not know where his firearm was. She also indicated that he had multiple weapons. Jesse witnessed this part of the conversation. Therefore, he knew about the concern that Marquis could have been armed. Javier and Deha left to search for the missing vehicle. Only Jesse and Beth remained at the scene. Beth told Jesse to transport Marquis as she finished with Celestiana. Before Jesse could leave, the other officers found the vehicle 2.6 miles away. Jesse decided to pull Marquis out of his vehicle and conduct a full search of him. He started walking toward his vehicle while putting medical-style gloves on. At this point, an acorn struck the top of Jesse's police vehicle. An acorn is the nut of an oak tree. It contains a seed and is the method through which oak trees reproduce. Acorns are usually about 1 to 2 inches long and about 1 inch wide. They weigh about 5 grams. They are an important food source for animals like deer, squirrels, birds, and insects. Historically, acorns have been recognized as being nonviolent and typically do not carry weapons. Not surprisingly, they have a very low rate of negative interactions with law enforcement. Unfortunately, that would not be the case for this particular acorn. After this vicious and unwarranted acorn attack, Jesse raised his right hand, fell to the ground, and yelled, "Shots fired," twice. He rolled onto his right side and yelled, "Shots fired," for the 3rd time. Beth responded to the noise that Jesse was making and walked toward his vehicle. She asked, "What? What?" Jesse retrieved his Sig Sauer P320 in his right hand and said, "Shots fired," for the 4th time. Beth said, "Where? Right there?" She was pointing at Jesse's patrol vehicle. Jesse responded, "In the car." He started firing at his own police cruiser. Jesse tried to stand up, fell backward, and was lying on his left side. Beth started firing her Sig Sauer P320 as well. She stopped firing about 3.5 seconds later and yelled, "Jesse, Jesse, are you okay?" Jesse resumed firing at his vehicle and yelled, "I'm hit, I'm hit." He ran out of ammunition and the slide of his weapon locked back. Jesse pushed up to his hands and knees and made a groaning noise. Beth asked, "Where is he? Where is he?" Jesse responded, "In the car." At this point, Jesse was crawling behind a vehicle to gain concealment and limited cover. In a dramatic fashion, he said the words, "He shot." Then there was a pause, and Jesse said, "Through the car." Beth used her radio to call for help by saying, shots fired, I've got a deputy down." When officers arrived, they pointed their weapons at Marquis Jackson, who was still unarmed and handcuffed in the back of Jesse's police cruiser. They found him to be uninjured. Jesse Hernandez was taken to the hospital, where medical professionals determined he had not been shot. Presumably, the Acorn was also uninjured. It was a tough nut to crack and escaped from the scene. The homicidal Acorn is squirreling away its anger, lurking and waiting for its next chance to bring terror upon the citizens of Fort Walton Beach. Who knows when it may strike again? Jesse was interviewed to get his side of the story. Here's what he told investigators. As Jesse was near his police cruiser, which contained Marquis Jackson, he heard what he believed to be a suppressed weapon off to the side. Simultaneously, he felt an impact on the right side of his torso near his shoulder. His legs gave out. He thought a shot had come from inside of his own police vehicle. He returned fire at the vehicle, believing that Marquis had shot him. Beth was also interviewed by the police. She was asked if she could identify where the threat was coming from during the incident. Beth indicated that she thought it was from Jesse's patrol vehicle. She was worried about Jesse because he was in the open, so she fired at the vehicle so Jesse could reach an area that was relatively safe. Jesse Hernandez resigned on December 4, 2023. Investigators determined that his behavior was not objectively reasonable, but no criminal charges were filed against him. The behavior of Beth Roberts was determined to be objectively reasonable, and she was exonerated. She was not disciplined as a result of firing her weapon during the incident. Marquis Jackson posted on Facebook and talked about his horrible experience. He mentioned how bullets were flying near him and glass was shattering around him. He was fortunate not to get hit, but indicated that he was not okay mentally. He said that he believed he was damaged for life. Now moving to my analysis. Many people were concerned that no criminal charges were filed in this case. The authorities disagree with the idea of charges, arguing that there was no reason to believe Jesse acted with malice, as if this is the only way criminal charges would be warranted. This brings me to the question, should Jesse Hernandez have been criminally charged in this case? Let's take a look at the evidence both for and against the idea that charges were warranted, starting with the inculpatory factors. The man who Jesse arrested, Marquis Jackson, did not have a gun on his person. He was searched twice before being handcuffed and placed in Jesse's police vehicle. Jesse knew or should have known Marquis did not have a gun. By his own admission, there were only 3 pieces of information that Jesse used to justify firing his weapon at Marquis Jackson. The sound of the Acorn hitting his vehicle, which he thought was a suppressed firearm, the belief that he had something strike his upper right torso, which never happened, and the sensation that his legs were not working normally. He did not see a weapon. Jesse did not see a muzzle flash. There was no gunshot. He was not struck by anything, and he was not injured. Jesse Hernandez launched into a massive, dramatic, and dangerous routine based on hearing a sound not unlike what many people experience every day. Even if one were to give Jesse a pass and assume that Marquis could have been armed, how would a bullet have exited the police cruiser without breaking a window or puncturing the sheet metal body panels? Jesse decided to fire his weapon at his vehicle, even though none of the windows were broken and there were no holes in the metal. Furthermore, Jesse repeatedly made false claims like shots fired and I'm hit, and indicated to Beth Roberts that the shots were coming from his vehicle. This caused Beth to fire her weapon. No one was injured, but firing a weapon counts as using deadly force. Jesse jeopardized the life of Marquis Jackson for absolutely no reason. Moving to the exculpatory factors, Jesse had a few reasons to be concerned about Marquis Jackson. According to the police, Marquis had a history of threatening his girlfriend. She was ending their 3-year relationship. He had recently sent threatening messages to her, including a photograph of a firearm suppressor. His girlfriend said that he had a history of becoming very violent over disagreements with her. Marquis owned firearms and was known to carry a firearm or have one in his vehicle. His vehicle was at the scene. Marquis did not physically resist, but he was described as verbally non-cooperative. Even though an acorn falling onto a vehicle does not sound like a gunshot, Jesse was aware of the image of the suppressor. When a firearm with a suppressor discharges, it makes a different type of sound. Instead of a crack or a bang sound, it's more like a softer thud sound. Jesse may have been on alert and listening for that particular sound, like he had worked himself up to be overly sensitive to that sound. Jesse had served as an officer in the Army Special Forces for 10 years and completed 2 rotations in Afghanistan, but he never experienced direct combat. When considering all the evidence, do I think that Jesse Hernandez should have been criminally charged? Yes, he should have been charged. If an average citizen walking down the street heard an acorn hitting a vehicle and fired their gun at a person, they would be charged. Jesse cannot use being a police officer as an excuse. He was never in danger. No one was shooting at him. He created an unnecessary danger and misled another officer into creating an unnecessary danger. I don't think he acted with malice, but his recklessness was unacceptable. What do I think happened in this case? This is just a theory, my opinion. Jesse Hernandez was grossly incompetent and way too sensitive to threats to be a police officer. For some reason, the image of the suppressor really affected him. When he heard the sound of an acorn hitting his police vehicle, it started a chain of events. He falsely believed this was a gunshot and that Marquis was the shooter. In a moment of panic, he felt a sensation on his torso. Believing that he was shot, his panic intensified and his legs failed. He did not have enough evidence to believe there was a danger, but he was responding to his emotions. He valued his emotions above all else and trusted them completely. He was able to provoke Beth into firing her weapon because she was trained to consider the word of another officer as credible. The root of this problem was probably a panic attack, but officers are expected not to fire at unarmed people even when panicking. A panic attack is not a license to kill. Now moving to my final thoughts. Even though Jesse appeared to be dangerously incompetent, there is an alternate way to think about this case. In a nutshell, without officers like Jesse, who's going to stand up to these homicidal acorns? Today, it's one acorn attacking an officer. Tomorrow, they join forces with pistachios and pecans to sow the seeds of destruction. Just when people thought it couldn't get any worse, the almonds get involved. Has anybody thought this through? We need more officers who will stand up to these nuts, to adopt the role of the nutcracker. There is a kernel of truth in this story. It may not be a good idea to let this problem spiral out of control. After all, from little acorns, mighty oaks grow. Those are my thoughts on the case of Jesse Hernandez. Please put any opinions and thoughts in the comment section. They always generate an interesting dialogue. As always, I hope you found my analysis of this topic to be informative. Thanks for watching. Throughout my years of making videos, I've covered a lot of police shootings. In some of the cases, I think the police officer was justified. In other cases, I feel differently. But this case is so much different than the typical police shooting case. Here, an officer acted with essentially no justification. One moment, the officer was walking. The next moment, he was shooting. And nothing really happened in between. It's a case that, of course, has a humorous component with the acorns and everything. But this is really a frightening scenario. I can't believe that in a case like this, criminal charges were not filed. It just doesn't make any sense at all. I think the people involved in this case, like the investigators, really felt badly for Jesse. And maybe they knew he was going to be the target of many acorn jokes for the rest of his life. But again, I do think that criminal charges were warranted in this case. And it worries me that these investigators were okay with an officer just shooting out of nowhere. It just doesn't make any sense.